I really felt a connection and a passion for having greenery and natural materials around me. I started making accessories for the plants that I had in my home, most of them being like macrame plant hangers. And I just wanted to put out what I was doing. It kind of evolved into not only just being able to provide people with a physical product that I enjoyed making with my own two hands. It's grown into this really lovely community of people who enjoy greenery and in how that enhances our life and our space and our environments from like a self-care perspective. I think had it not been for Cree Ryan and putting myself out there and networking from a business perspective, there's a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I've also been able to take a few steps into the Indigenous community. It's allowed me to speak more to that and to embrace that and to put that out there, or to start conversations with people in the community and, you know, lead to relationships in that way. My dad is Cree from Fisher River Cree Nation here in Manitoba, and my mom, she's half Ojibwe and she's part white as well. My dad's side of the family was a lot more in touch with a traditional Indigenous upbringing. With my mom, it was very different. She was always taught not to embrace that Indigenous in her, and she very much clung to the whiteness in her just as a means of pure self-preservation. After my parents split, being with my mom, that was very much just the avenue that I was led down by default, really. I grew up in Steinbach. It's a small, you know, Mennonite community, very, very religious. I remember just always feeling a little bit different. You know, most of my friends were blonde hair and blue eyes, and even simple things like, you know, the hair on my arms was darker, or, you know, my hair, when it was wet and it dried, it was like frizzy and it was like big and it was out of control. And it was all of these like little things, especially as you grow up as a young woman, when you like enter puberty, or when you're so acutely aware of your body, and body image struggles are just like the norm for every girl. I felt so much around that time especially that I was so much more aware of the fact that some of the issues that I had with my body or with my appearance were not the same as some of the girls that I was friends with. I remember experiencing a lot of comments that didn't necessarily celebrate that I was this way because I was Indigenous. A lot of it felt like kind of backhanded compliments almost. You know, I would have someone say to me, "Oh, like you're so pretty. You know, what are you? Where did you come from? What's your ethnicity? Are you Mexican? Are you Spanish?" And you know, when I would say like, "Well, no, actually, like I'm Indigenous. I'm from here," it was always usually followed by a reaction of, "Oh, really?" Like, I never felt celebrated in that. Like, I never felt excited to tell someone that I was Indigenous, that I was Aboriginal, I always felt like I wasn't sure what the reaction was going to be. I didn't know where I fit because I didn't feel like I fit into the typical Indigenous upbringing, whatever that meant according to somebody else. And I really didn't feel like I fit into the typical white family that didn't experience some of the things that I experienced on a day-to-day basis growing up. And that was a very confusing place to be in. I remember actually the first time when I started to really feel comfortable about really wanting to embrace the fact that I was an Indigenous woman. I was in my early 20s and I wanted to get a tattoo of a feather. And as corny as that sounds, it was really something that I wanted to do in a place that was visible, so that when somebody asked, "Oh, why did you get that?" I wanted to say that it was a representation of who I am as an Indigenous woman. And although that doesn't seem like it's a huge step, it was massive for me to just come to that place of acceptance where I wanted it to be a conversation starter. I wanted to say these things. It was like one of the healing steps that I took to just embrace who I was and to feel empowered by that. We definitely are aware that we need to be more intentional about teaching my son some of the aspects of his Indigenous culture, because it just doesn't come up necessarily as freely in conversation, or when he walks down the street or when he goes to preschool. Those things aren't being taught to him, so it's something that we very much need to be intentional about at home, and finding resources where we can do that. And again, for myself, feeling confident in being able to relay that information to him while I'm still working on discovering it for myself. My hesitations or my reservations in wanting to put myself out there in the Indigenous community, or to really immerse myself in it, were certainly not because of any resistance that I felt from that community, but more so just within myself. I have struggled with not feeling Indigenous enough, being raised in a small religious white community. I've felt a little bit insecure about the fact that I didn't have the traditional Indigenous upbringing, whatever that means, and now realizing as a woman, I am an Indigenous woman, regardless of what that may look like or how my experience has shaped me differently. It's a work in progress, but I'm working towards it.